This video is sponsored by Sony Handycam. There are times when having a single display isn't enough, and that happens back when we have flip phones, in which the external display will show notifications coming through our device. Now, with touchscreen devices, we never have to need that, because we either have smart wearables or can simply live with the notifications light. The YotaPhone is trying to relive the experience that we once have on flip phones by employing a dual screen design on a block form factor. How does this concept work in real life? Let's find out in the full review. Announced back in CES 2013, the YotaPhone is extremely late to reach the Malaysian market. Despite of that, the company hasn't gained much attention in the global smartphone market. The YotaPhone is made by Russian company Yota Devices. Apple's co-founder Steve Wozniak was the main contributor of this product, and the company bought the entire Nokia R&D team to design the phone. Sounds really great, isn't it? Well, in fact, the phone would look pretty good if it was sold last year. But when phones today come with metal frames and aluminum chassis, the YotaPhone looks dated in its design. The purpose of buying a YotaPhone is really all about the secondary e-paper or e-ink display, which is an extremely awesome concept. The phone has mid-range hardware internals, a Snapdragon 400 dual-core processor, 2GB of RAM, 32GB flash memory with no expansion, a small but nice 4.3-inch 720p IPS display with Corning Gorilla Glass, and a similar size and always-on 4.3-inch e-paper display with 640 by 360 pixels. The phone's main camera is a 30MP f2.2 shooter, and the front-facing camera takes 1.3MP pictures. The battery size is a small 1800 mAh, and the phone fortunately supports LTE networks. The YotaPhone's display is fairly small for today's standards. Color saturation can be boring despite being an IPS display. Fortunately, viewing angles and outdoor visibility is good. Its 342 ppi pixel density doesn't disappoint in viewing text. The e-paper display is a joy to look at when the phone's main display is switched off. People won't realize it as a display, but rather a case or a vinyl on the phone's back cover. It shows app notifications, messages, incoming calls, and email notifications. Let's talk about software. The YotaPhone has Android 4.2.2 Jelly Bean running, and sadly, the company isn't updating the phone to KitKat or even Lollipop. The company has fortunately kept us happy with the stock Android experience. It makes the phone's hardware perform reasonably well with its mid-range hardware. Still, the phone isn't snappy enough to allow multitasking like a pro. Most people are confused when we pass them the YotaPhone. The phone doesn't come with capacitive or on-screen menu buttons, but rather, you are controlling the phone with its touch zone area hidden in its lower bezels. Performing left and right swipe gestures gives you the back and home button feature. Double tap on the middle gives you the app switcher, and holding onto it gets you to Google Now. That goes the same for the secondary display. The touch zone is even more limited, so you are going to have a hard time using it. Swiping to the left and right allows you to navigate through menus and content, while holding on the middle zone gets you to the application list or selecting an option. Overall, the YotaPhone isn't too difficult to operate. However, we would prefer to have on-screen buttons, and it makes more sense to have them than a touch zone. Now, onto the phone's e-paper display. While it does attempt to demonstrate its usability if you are a person who wants to read ebooks and text for long hours, it also shows relevant information you need to know without even turning on the phone's main display. However, the usage is limited to a number of apps, and it lacks localized online content. Most of them are sadly still in Russian language. The YotaPhone's secondary display is an amazing concept that works, but sadly, it is a feature that you won't be using after a certain period of time. The 30MP camera performs well in both outdoor and indoor shots. It's not the best 30MP shooter that we have seen, and the camera software isn't as useful as other smartphones you'll find within the same range. Despite of that, the YotaPhone does try to show some fun with its secondary display, which changes into a camera animation when the camera is activated. The camera's location isn't great, as your fingers blocks it when you're holding in a portrait orientation. The phone also takes good 1080p resolution videos, and again, is not the best that we have seen in the same range of smartphones. Battery life on the YotaPhone isn't great. It delivers a paltry 3 hours duration in between light and middleweight usage, and the phone will require a charge in the middle of the day. The phone performs fairly well in benchmarks with its hardware internals and still gets a score range above some mid-range devices today. LTE works well on the YotaPhone, and we have faced no issues in making good quality voice calls. The YotaPhone's loudspeaker works fine, but not great on music listening and phone calls. If the YotaPhone had reached earlier in our shores, the phone would have been a great hit that time. It introduces an amazingly useful concept with the e-paper display. However, it falls short of its usability, and the company has failed to introduce software updates to improve the user experience, despite already working on the next successor. The phone's hardware already isn't something to be excited about. Its expensive price tag makes things worse and doesn't do any justice for a secondary display that can't work well in our everyday life. The YotaPhone retails at 1699 ringgit with free shipping. It is disappointing, and while the phone faces a strong wall of cheap Chinese smartphones, its features also lack the hype that it is supposed to have. The YotaPhone scores 6.1 out of 10. That's gotta do it for this episode of Gadget Review, and thank you very much for watching. Head on to KLGadgetGuy.com to read more about the YotaPhone and subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, for more updates. We'll see you again, and I'm off to review the next gadget. Cheers!